Jin and RM clash over BTS's future abroad, forcing the members to confront fears about identity, loyalty, and what comes next. Then say it, Namjoon, do you want BTS to belong to the world more than we belong to each other? The room went so silent that Jin could hear the faint electrical hum coming from the ceiling. RM did not answer. He stood on the opposite side of the conference table, one hand pressed against the edge of a folder, his fingers curled so tightly around the paper that the corner had begun to bend. The city beyond the enormous windows glittered beneath a layer of summer rain, Seoul stretching endlessly beneath them, familiar and impossibly distant at the same time. Jin stared at him. "Say it," Jin repeated, quieter this time. RM finally lifted his eyes. "I never said that. You didn't have to." The words struck harder than either of them expected. Across the room, Jimin stopped moving. Jungkook lowered the bottle of water he had been drinking. Taeyoung's expression changed almost imperceptibly, his playful smile disappearing as he looked from Jin to RM. J-Hope sat frozen in his chair. Suga, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, slowly uncrossed them. Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared. The argument had started 20 minutes earlier over a contract. That was what everyone had told themselves. A contract, a proposal, a possible international base, a production studio outside Korea, a schedule that would require the members to spend months overseas, a plan that on paper looked like opportunity. But now Jin understood that the folders sitting between them had never really been the problem. The problem was everything they had been afraid to say. "You think I'm afraid of change," Jin said. RM's jaw tightened. "I think you're afraid of losing something." Jin laughed once. There was no humor in it. "Of course I'm afraid." The room seemed to shrink. Jin pulled out the chair behind him and sat down. "I've spent half my life being afraid of losing this." His gaze moved slowly across the room. The others, the people who had stood beside him when there was almost nothing, the people who had watched him grow from a young man who made jokes whenever he was nervous into someone who had learned that laughter could sometimes be the only thing keeping everyone together. Jin looked back at RM. "So don't stand there and tell me that leaving Korea for months at a time is just another schedule." RM inhaled slowly. "I never said it was just another schedule. Then what is it? A possibility. A possibility of what?" RM hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Jin's eyes narrowed. "Exactly." "Hung?" Jimin said softly. Jin didn't look at him. "No, let him answer." RM stepped away from the table. "It's a possibility that we can build something that doesn't disappear when the world changes." Jin stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means we can't pretend the industry is going to stay the same forever. We know that." "No, Jin, we know it in theory, but every time somebody brings up what happens next, we talk about going back to the old routine. Korea, Seoul, the studio, the same rooms, the same schedules, the same assumptions." Jin stood. "And what's wrong with wanting something familiar?" "Nothing." "Then why do you sound ashamed of it?" RM's eyes flashed. "I'm not ashamed." "You are." "No." "You are." "I said no." Their voices echoed against the glass walls. Jungkook flinched. Suga looked down. J-Hope quietly rubbed his thumb against the side of his hand, an old nervous habit none of the others had seen in months. Taeyoung stared at the rain. Finally, Jimin stood up. "Maybe we should take a break." "No," Jin said. RM spoke at the same time. "Stay." Jin turned toward him. RM's expression was tired now, the anger still present but buried beneath something much heavier. "Please," RM said. "Let's finish this." Jin looked at him for several seconds. Then he sat down again. "All right." RM returned to his chair. The folder remained between them. Neither touched it. For several moments, there was only the sound of rain. Then RM said, "The proposal isn't asking us to leave Korea." Jin's eyes remained fixed on him. "It asks us to establish a second creative base overseas." "Where?" "Los Angeles." Jin's mouth tightened. "How long?" "Potentially 3 to 6 months at a time." "Potentially." "Yes." "And how many of us?" "All of us, when possible." Jin gave a small nod. "When possible." RM knew what was coming. "And when it isn't possible, we adjust." "Meaning, some of us stay in Korea, some travel." Jin leaned back. "That sounds convenient."
It is practical. For whom? RM stared at him. For BTS. Jin's expression hardened. No, that's exactly the problem. RM's eyebrows pulled together. What problem? You keep saying BTS like it's a company. The sentence landed heavily. Jin pointed toward the folder. That document doesn't know who Jungkook is. It doesn't know Jimin hates sleeping on unfamiliar pillows. It doesn't know Taehyung gets restless when he's away from home too long. It doesn't know Hosei calls his family every night. It doesn't know Yoongi pretends he doesn't care about anything and then notices every tiny detail. It doesn't know you can't sleep when you've been carrying something alone for too long.
RM's eyes lowered. And it doesn't know me. Jin's voice softened. That is what I'm saying. For the first time, RM looked wounded, not angry, wounded. Jungkook slowly put his water bottle down. Jimin glanced at him. Taehyung turned away from the window. Suga's eyes remained on RM. Jin sighed. I know what you're trying to do. Do you? Yes. Then tell me. You're trying to protect the future. RM said nothing. You think if we don't expand, if we don't move, if we don't build something bigger, eventually we'll wake up and realize the world has moved on without us. RM's face remained still. Jin continued. And you're terrified of that. RM's fingers loosened around the edge of the folder. You're not wrong. The confession surprised everyone. RM looked toward the window. I'm terrified. Nobody spoke. I wake up sometimes, he continued, and I wonder whether we're already living in the afterglow of something that can't happen twice. Jin's expression changed. RM swallowed. We've achieved things none of us imagined when we started. That's exactly why I'm afraid. He rubbed his palms together. Because what happens when the biggest thing we've ever done becomes something people talk about in the past tense? Jungkook looked down. Jimin's lips parted slightly. RM continued. I don't want us to become a memory. The words were almost a whisper. I don't want BTS to be something people say, remember when they were everywhere? Jin watched him carefully. That's why you want America. I want options. That's different. I know. Then why does it feel like you're running? RM's eyes lifted. Because maybe I am. Nobody expected that answer. Jin's anger disappeared for a moment. What are you running from? RM looked at his 6 members, his family, his history, his fears. Myself, maybe. Suga finally spoke. That's the first honest thing you've said tonight. RM gave him a tired look. Thanks. I'm not complimenting you. I know. Then let's stop pretending this is about a building. RM nodded slowly. All right. What do you actually want? RM was silent. The rain grew heavier. I want BTS to have a future where none of us feels trapped. Trapped? Yes. By Korea? No. By each other? RM hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than the answer would have. Jin looked away. Jimin immediately noticed. Namjoon. RM shook his head. No, let me explain. He leaned forward. I don't mean trapped by each other in a bad way. I mean, we've spent so much of our lives being BTS that sometimes I don't know where the individual person ends and the group begins. Jin's gaze lowered. That sounds familiar. RM looked at him. Jin smiled faintly. You think you're the only one who's scared? No? Good. Because I am too. The room softened. Jin looked at the floor. When I enlisted, I thought about something ridiculous. Jungkook looked up. What? I wondered whether everyone would forget me. Jin laughed quietly. I know, right? Stupid, right? No, Jimin said. Jin glanced at him. It felt stupid at the time. BTS kept moving. You kept working. The world kept turning. And I was somewhere else. He paused. I realized how easy it would be for one member to become absent without the group collapsing. Nobody spoke. Jin's voice became quieter. And that scared me more than I ever admitted. Jungkook's eyes reddened. You thought we'd move on without you? I knew you could. Jin looked directly at him. That's different. Jungkook swallowed. Jin smiled. But you didn't. No, Jungkook said immediately. His voice cracked. We didn't. Jin nodded. I know. Jimin wiped beneath one eye before anyone could notice. Taehyung noticed anyway. He said nothing. RM stared at the table. I was afraid of something similar. Jin looked at him. When you were away? Yes. What? That the group would become stronger without me. Jin blinked.
RM gave a humorless smile. Not because I thought you didn't need me, because sometimes I thought maybe I was the reason everything felt so complicated. Suga raised his eyebrows. That is the most RM thing you've ever said. RM almost smiled. Almost. Jin shook his head. You're an idiot. I know, but you're our idiot. Jungkook laughed softly. The tension broke for half a second. Then the conference room door opened. Everyone turned. A staff member stepped inside, holding a phone. Sorry. Nobody answered. She looked uncomfortable. There has been a leak. RM immediately stood. What kind of leak? The proposal. The room went cold. Jin's face changed. What? The international expansion document. RM took a step toward her. Who has it? We don't know. Where is it? Online. J-Hope stood. Already? The staff member nodded. Screenshots are spreading. Jungkook reached for his phone. Jimin grabbed his wrist. Don't look. Too late. Jungkook's screen lit up. Notifications appeared one after another. Thousands, then tens of thousands. His face drained. What did they post? Nobody answered. Jungkook looked at RM. They're saying we're leaving Korea. Jin closed his eyes. RM's shoulders stiffened. The staff member continued. Some posts claim BTS is planning to relocate permanently.
Jin opened his eyes. Permanently? Yes. That isn't true. I know. But people won't. No. Jin looked at RM. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then RM asked quietly, how much of the document leaked? Almost all of it. Suga cursed under his breath. Taeyong took out his phone. His expression became increasingly unreadable. Jimin leaned closer. What are they saying? Taeyong looked up. They're fighting. Who? Everyone. Jin sighed. Of course. Taeyong turned his phone around. The screen was filled with comments. Some fans were furious. Others were frightened. Some accused the company of trying to separate the members. Others celebrated the possibility of global expansion. Some insisted BTS was abandoning Korea. Others said Korea had never given them enough freedom. The arguments were multiplying by the second. Jungkook stared. They're fighting over us. Jin's voice was quiet. They always do. But this feels different. It did, because this time the disagreement was not between strangers discussing a celebrity. It was about the identity of BTS itself. Korea or the world, home or expansion, tradition or reinvention, and buried underneath every argument was one terrifying question. Would BTS remain BTS if their lives became too different? RM walked toward the window. The city looked blurred by rain. He could see his reflection in the glass. For a moment, he barely recognized himself. Jin approached from behind. You wanted the truth. RM nodded. You're getting it. Jin stood beside him. We're not going to decide tonight. RM looked at him. Agreed. And we're not going to let the internet decide for us. Agreed. Jin folded his arms. And you're not leaving Korea without talking to us again. RM smiled faintly. I wasn't planning to. Good. They stood there. 7 reflections in the dark glass. 7 silhouettes. 1 group. But for the first time in years, nobody was completely certain what that word meant. The door opened again. This time it was a manager. Everyone, we need to move. J-Hope frowned. Why? The press is downstairs. Jimin's eyes widened. Already? They're asking about the leak. Jungkook looked toward the window. The rain had begun to slow, but outside, camera flashes were already appearing near the building entrance. 1, 2, then dozens. Jin sighed. Well, looks like we have an audience. Nobody laughed. They gathered their things. RM picked up the folder. Jin stopped him. Leave it. RM looked down. What? Leave it here. Why? Because tonight isn't about the contract. RM stared at him. Then what is it about? Jin looked around the room. It's about whether we still know how to talk to each other before the world talks for us. RM slowly placed the folder back on the table. All right. The members left the room together. The hallway outside was strangely quiet. Their footsteps echoed across polished floors. Jungkook walked beside Jimin. Taeyong and J-Hope followed. Suga walked behind them, hands in his pockets. Jin and RM remained at the back. Neither spoke. At the elevator, Jin pressed the button.
The doors opened. Everyone stepped inside. The elevator began descending. For several floors there was silence. Then Jungkook whispered, "Hyung." RM looked at him. "Are you scared?" RM thought about lying. He didn't. "Yes." Jungkook nodded. "Me too." Jimin reached over and squeezed Jungkook's shoulder. Taehyung looked at RM through the mirrored wall. "I think everyone is." J-Hope smiled sadly. "Maybe that's why we're fighting." Suga nodded. "Fear makes people loud." Jin looked at him. "That's surprisingly wise. Don't get used to it." Jin laughed. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. Noise flooded in immediately. Camera shutters, voices, questions. "RM, are BTS leaving Korea?" "Jin, is the group moving to the United States?" "Are you separating?" "Is the contract real?" "Are you planning to build a permanent base overseas?" The security team formed a barrier. The members moved forward. Jin could hear his own name being shouted. He kept walking. RM walked beside him. A reporter shouted the question that made everyone stop. "RM, is BTS still a Korean group?" The hallway went silent. RM froze. Jin turned his head. Their eyes met. For 1 second, neither knew what to say. Then Jin stepped forward. He looked toward the cameras. "BTS is not a building." The reporters quieted. Jin continued. "It's not a country either." RM stared at him. Jin's voice remained calm. "We are 7 people who have spent years learning how to stand together." The cameras flashed. "And wherever we work, wherever we perform, wherever life takes us, that doesn't change overnight." A reporter shouted, "But are you leaving Korea?" Jin looked at RM. RM looked back. Then RM stepped forward. "We haven't decided." The reporters erupted. Jin didn't move. RM raised his voice. "And we're not going to make that decision because of a leaked document, a headline, or a rumor." Another camera flashed. "We'll make it together." For the first time that night, Jin smiled. Not because the problem had disappeared, it hadn't, but because RM had finally said the words Jin had been waiting for. Together. They walked outside. The rain had stopped.
The pavement reflected the lights from the cameras. Fans stood behind barriers, some crying, some holding signs, some simply staring. Jin looked at them. He saw fear in their faces. He understood it, because he felt the same thing. The future was coming whether they were ready or not. But maybe the future didn't have to mean leaving something behind. Maybe it meant carrying it with them. Later that night, long after the cameras disappeared, the 7 members returned to their private meeting room. Nobody wanted to go home yet. They sat on the floor instead of around the table. Someone ordered food, someone opened a window, someone turned off the harsh conference lights. The room slowly became warm again. Normal. Jungkook sat with his back against the sofa. Taewon was lying on the carpet staring at the ceiling. J-Hope was eating noodles. Jimin was scrolling silently through messages. Suga had his headphones around his neck but wasn't playing anything. Jin sat beside RM. Neither had spoken for several minutes. Finally, Jin said, "You know what the worst part is?" RM looked at him. "What?" "It actually think the idea could work." RM smiled. "I know. That annoys me. I know." Jin sighed. "But not like this." RM nodded. "Not like this." They sat quietly. Then RM said, "If we do it differently." Jin looked at him. "How?" "We don't move away from Korea." "Okay." "We don't create a situation where anyone feels forced." "Okay." "We don't let work become the only reason we're together." Jin smiled. "That's harder." "I know." "And?" RM looked around the room. "And we make sure that wherever we go, we can come back." Jin's smile faded into something gentler. "That's all I wanted." RM nodded. "I know." The clock continued moving. Nobody rushed to leave. Outside, Seoul had become quiet. The city was still there.
The streets, the lights, the familiar sounds, the place where their story had begun. But somewhere beyond the horizon waited another possibility. Not an escape, not an ending, just another road. Jin leaned his head against the wall. Namjoon? Yeah? If you ever start thinking you have to carry the whole future by yourself again, RM looked at him. Tell me. RM smiled. I will. Jin nodded. Good. Across the room, suddenly Jungkook laughed at something on his phone. Everyone looked at him. What? Jungkook shook his head. Nothing. Then why you laughing? Jimin asked. Jungkook looked around at them. Because someone online said BTS is having a civil war. Suga snorted. J-Hope laughed. Taewon covered his face. Even Jin smiled. RM shook his head. Do we look like we're having a civil war? Jin looked at him. 5 minutes ago, maybe. Everyone laughed. The sound filled the room. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't an answer. It didn't erase the argument. It didn't solve the question of Korea, overseas work, contracts, expectations, and the enormous future waiting beyond the horizon. But for that moment, it was enough. 7 voices, 7 different fears, 7 different dreams, still sitting in the same room, still listening, still choosing one another. And as dawn slowly began to lighten the windows of Seoul, the leaked document remained untouched on the conference table. For the first time that night, nobody was afraid of it, because the future had stopped being something they needed to conquer. It had become something they could face together.
Turn that screen off, Yoongi, before somebody says something they can never take back. The warning came from Suga so sharply that Yoongi's thumb stopped in midair, hovering over the glowing phone in his hand. Nobody laughed this time. The room that had felt almost peaceful only minutes earlier suddenly seemed to contract around them again, the warmth disappearing as if someone had opened a door to winter. Yoongi slowly lowered the phone. They've already said it, he whispered. Thousands of them. Then don't feed it, Suga replied. They're angry because they're scared, Jimin said quietly. Some of them think we're leaving Korea, others think we're breaking up, some are saying the company planned this. Jin leaned forward. Did they? The question was directed toward the manager standing near the doorway. The manager froze. RM immediately noticed. What? He asked. Why did you hesitate? The manager glanced toward the folder on the table. Because there is something else you need to know. Jin's expression hardened. Of course there is. RM stood. What is it? The document that leaked wasn't the final version. Silence. Taehyung slowly sat upright. What? The manager swallowed. Someone leaked an earlier internal draft. Suga's eyes narrowed. Earlier draft, yes. So the version online isn't what we agreed to discuss tonight. No. Jin looked at RM. Then what exactly are people arguing about? The manager didn't answer immediately. RM walked toward him. Tell us everything. The leaked document contains language suggesting that BTS would establish a permanent international headquarters. Yoongi's face changed. Permanent. That word was removed from the latest draft. Removed by whom? RM asked. You. The answer landed like a slap. RM stared at him. I removed it. Yes. Jin slowly turned toward RM. You knew about this. I knew there had been a proposal. That's not what I asked. RM's voice tightened. I didn't approve the leak. I didn't say you did, but you're looking at me like I did, because you were the one pushing hardest for expansion, and I was also the one who removed the permanent relocation language. Jin's eyes remained fixed on him. Why didn't you tell us? RM opened his mouth. Nothing came out. J-Hope looked between them. Namjoon, RM exhaled, because I knew how everyone would react. Jin stood. You mean you knew we'd disagree? Yes. So you decided we'd be easier to manage if we didn't know. That's not what happened. Then what happened? RM's voice rose. I was trying to figure out what I actually believed before I brought it to you. You don't get to decide that alone, Jin shouted. The others went silent. RM's face tightened. I know. Do you? Yes. Because you keep saying you know after you already make the decision. And you keep assuming I make decisions because I don't trust you. Maybe because you keep hiding them. The words echoed through the room. Jimin stood. Hyung, please. Jin turned toward him. No, Jimin, this is exactly what we've been avoiding. RM slammed his palm against the table. Fine, then let's stop avoiding it. Everyone flinched. RM breathed hard, staring at Jin. You want the truth? I'm exhausted. Jin's anger faltered. From what? From being the person everyone expects to have an answer. RM pointed toward the folder. You think I want to be the one who keeps asking what happens next? You think I enjoy reading contracts at 2 in the morning? You think I like wondering whether every decision I make will eventually hurt one of you? His voice cracked. I don't. Jin stared at him. Then stop carrying it alone. RM laughed bitterly. I tried. When? Tonight. No, tonight was the first time you admitted you were scared. That's not the same thing. RM's eyes reddened. What do you want from me? I want you to trust us. I do. Then act like it. Nobody spoke. RM looked down. Jin's breathing slowed. The anger remained, but beneath it was something more fragile. You know why this hurts? Jin asked. RM looked up. Because I remember when you were the one telling us that nobody should have to carry everything alone. RM's lips pressed together. I remember. You taught us that. I know. So why don't you believe your own advice? RM looked away. Because sometimes knowing something and being able to live by it are two different things. Suga nodded once. That's true. Jin sat again. Then start now. RM didn't answer. He walked toward the window instead. Outside, the first hint of morning had begun to touch the sky. The city was gray-blue, wet streets reflecting headlights, buildings rising like silent witnesses. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Taehyung spoke. There's something else. Everyone turned. Taehyung was staring at his phone. What? J-Hope asked. Taehyung looked at RM. Someone is claiming the leak came from inside our team. RM's expression hardened. Who? They haven't named anyone, but they have evidence. They're saying they do. Jin stood again. Show me. Taehyung hesitated. Maybe you shouldn't. Show me. Taehyung handed him the phone. Jin read the post. His eyes moved rapidly across the screen. The accusation was vague but dangerous. Someone close to BTS had allegedly provided the document to a foreign media outlet in exchange for money and influence. There was a photograph attached, a blurred image of a person entering a building. The caption claimed the person was one of their senior staff members. Jin stared at it. This is ridiculous. It's spreading, Taehyung said. How fast? Jimin asked. Millions of views. Jungkook whispered. Already? Suga took the phone. He studied the image carefully. This isn't our building. RM looked at him. You're sure? Yes. How? Look at the security sign. Suga zoomed in. Different company. Jin leaned closer. Then why would they use it? Suga's expression darkened. Because whoever made this wants people to believe the leak came from someone close to us. J-Hope's voice was quiet, which means the real story isn't just the proposal. Nobody answered. A strange silence settled over them. The argument from earlier suddenly felt smaller. There was a leak. There was misinformation, there was a growing public fight, and now there was an accusation of betrayal. RM walked back to the table. We need to know who had access to the draft. The manager immediately looked uncomfortable. Several people. Names. Namjoon. Names. The manager hesitated. Legal, management, strategy, international partnerships, communications. Members, Jin asked. You all had access to different versions. Jin glanced at RM. Different versions. Yes. So someone could have taken an older version and leaked it. Possibly, Suga folded his arms, or someone deliberately created a fake trail. RM looked at him. Why? To make us distrust each other. Jungkook frowned. Who would want that? Suga shrugged. Someone who benefits from chaos. That's too vague, Jimin said. Then let's make it less vague. Suga looked around the room. If BTS publicly fights over Korea versus overseas expansion, the group becomes easier to manipulate. Investors panic, sponsors react. The company loses leverage. International partners gain leverage. Everybody starts negotiating from fear. Jin stared at him. You're saying someone wants us divided. I'm saying division is valuable. RM's face became expressionless. Then we don't give them that. Jin nodded. Agreed. J-Hope looked at both of them. But what about the fans? We tell them the truth, Jimin said. What truth? Taehyung asked. Jimin looked down. That we don't know everything yet. Jungkook frowned. Would that help? Maybe not immediately. Jimin looked at him. But lying won't. Jin nodded slowly. He's right. RM took a breath. Then we issue a statement. The manager immediately shook his head. We need to coordinate with the company. Jin's eyes narrowed. No, Jin, no, not another statement written by 12 people who don't know what we're feeling. RM looked at the manager. He's right. We need legal approval. We'll get it, RM said, but the words have to come from us. The manager looked uncertain. That's risky. Jin smiled bitterly. So is everything else. They gathered around the table. A laptop was opened. The room became strangely quiet as RM began typing. What do we say? Yoongi asked. RM looked at him. That we're aware of the leaked document, and that it isn't the final proposal. And, Jimin asked. RM paused. Jin answered. That BTS has not decided to relocate. RM typed. And that no member has decided to leave. J-Hope added. And that we're discussing our future together. Taehyung leaned forward. Say something about Korea. RM looked at him. What? Say that Korea is home. Jin nodded. But don't make it sound like we're promising never to work overseas. RM thought for a moment. We can say that our roots remain here while our music can travel anywhere. Suga smiled faintly. That's annoyingly diplomatic. Thank you. It wasn't a compliment. Yoongi laughed. The tension loosened slightly. RM continued typing. Then he stopped. There's one thing missing. What? Jin asked. RM looked at all 6 of them. We need to say that whatever happens, the decision belongs to all 7. Nobody objected. He typed the sentence. They read it together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't promise the impossible, but it was honest. The manager sent it for review. They waited 10 minutes, 20, 40. During that time, nobody touched their phones. Then the approval came. Jin read the final version aloud. We are aware of the circulation of an internal document concerning possible future activities outside Korea. The document currently circulating is not a final decision or agreement. BTS remains committed to its roots in Korea while continuing to explore opportunities to share music and creativity with audiences around the world. Most importantly, decisions regarding BTS's future will continue to be discussed and made together by all 7 members. He looked up. Good. RM nodded. Send it. The manager did. For several seconds nothing happened. Then the phones began vibrating once, twice, then continuously. Yoongi stared at his screen. It's spreading. Jimin smiled faintly. What are people saying? Some are relieved. And the others? Yoongi hesitated. Still angry, Jin sighed. We can't control everyone. I know. Remember that. A few minutes later a new message arrived. The manager's expression changed immediately. RM noticed. What? The company received another leak. Jin's eyes narrowed. Another document? No. Then what? The manager turned the laptop around. On the screen was a private internal email. It contained a sentence that made every member freeze. If the 7 cannot agree, proceed with the international plan using the members who are willing. Nobody breathed. Jin read it again. What is this? RM stepped closer. That's not from me. Whose signature? Jimin asked. The manager pointed. Senior Strategy Division. Suga's face became cold. So this was being discussed without us. Apparently. Jin looked at RM. Did you know? No. Jin believed him immediately. That frightened him more because it meant RM hadn't been the problem. The problem was much bigger. Yoongi stood. They're planning for a version of BTS without all 7. It appears so, the manager said carefully. No. Jin's voice was quiet. Everyone looked at him. No one plans a version of BTS without the 7 of us. RM nodded. Agreed. Then we need to know who authorized this. The manager looked pale. That may take time. Jin stood. We don't have time. Jin, no. He pointed toward the screen. That sentence changes everything. RM stepped beside him. He's right. J-Hope looked worried. What are we going to do? RM stared at the email. We're going to ask a question. Suga looked at him. Which is? RM's expression hardened. Who decided they could negotiate our future without us? The room fell silent again. This time, however, the silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of 7 people afraid they might lose each other. It was the silence before 7 people decided they would not allow anyone else to decide what they were. Hours later, the sun had fully risen over Seoul. News channels were broadcasting the statement. Fans were translating it into dozens of languages. The hashtags had changed. The arguments had shifted. Some people were still furious. Others were celebrating, some were analyzing every word, but inside the building, BTS had stopped watching the internet. They were watching one another. Jin stood by the window. RM joined him. "You still think I'm trying to drag us overseas?" RM asked. Jin smiled faintly. "I think you're trying to make sure we have choices." "And you?" "I'm trying to make sure having choices doesn't mean losing home." RM nodded. "Maybe those things don't have to fight each other." Jin looked at him. "Maybe. I owe you an apology." Jin shook his head. "So do I." RM smiled. "That doesn't sound fair. Life isn't fair. You always have an answer." "No, I just have more years of pretending I do." RM laughed softly. Jin looked at him. "But listen to me." "I'm listening." "If you ever feel like running again, tell us." RM nodded. "And if you ever feel like staying only because you're afraid to leave, tell me." Jin stared at him. That sentence struck deeper than the argument. "All right." They stood together in silence. Behind them, the other 5 members were slowly returning to ordinary conversation. J-Hope was asking what everyone wanted for breakfast. Taehyung was arguing that pancakes were superior to noodles. Suga told him he was objectively wrong. Jimin laughed. Jungkook opened the curtains wider. The room filled with morning light. Jin looked at RM. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "For years we thought the hardest part would be becoming famous." RM smiled. "We were idiots, completely. The hard part is staying human after everyone starts treating you like an institution." Jin looked back at the others. "Then let's be idiots a little longer." RM laughed. "Deal." No announcement could guarantee the future. No contract could protect them from every fear. No country could contain everything they wanted to become. But when the 7 of them finally left the building that afternoon, they did so together. Not because every disagreement had disappeared, but because they had finally learned something more important than agreement. They had learned that disagreement did not have to mean separation. Sometimes it meant caring enough to fight honestly. Sometimes it meant admitting fear. Sometimes it meant saying, "I don't know," and trusting the people beside you to remain there while you figured it out. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be meetings, negotiations, headlines, rumors, and difficult choices. There would be arguments that hurt more than this one. There would be moments when Korea felt too small and moments when the world felt too large. But for now, they walked through the sunlight together, 7 shadows stretching across the pavement, neither ahead nor behind the others. And when Jin glanced sideways and saw RM walking beside him, he didn't see a leader carrying the future. He saw Namjoon, his friend, still learning how to carry it with everyone else. "Someone just offered me a contract to perform without the others." Jungkook's voice was so quiet that at first nobody understood what he had said. Then the room went completely still. The spoon in J-Hope's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Taehyung slowly lowered his phone. Jimin looked up from the message he had been reading. Suga's expression changed first, his eyes sharpening as he looked directly at Jungkook. Jin stopped walking. RM turned around. "What did you say?" Jungkook swallowed. "I got an email." He held up his phone. "An overseas promoter. They want me to headline something, alone." Nobody spoke. "How much?" Suga asked. Jungkook looked at him. "That's not the point." "I know," Suga replied. "I asked because I want to know how serious the offer is." Jungkook stared at the screen. "Very serious." Jin walked over. "Who sent it?" "A company in Los Angeles." RM's face tightened. "Which company?" Jungkook gave him the name. RM immediately looked at the manager. Manager shook his head. "We weren't informed." "That's impossible," Jin said. "Apparently not," Suga muttered. Jimin stood beside Jungkook. "When did they send it?" "Last night." "Before or after the leak?" "After." RM held out his hand. "Can I see?" Jungkook hesitated, then passed him the phone. RM read the message slowly. His expression became increasingly difficult to read. "They know about the proposal," Jin frowned. "Of course they do." "No," RM said. "Read this." Jin took the phone. His eyes moved down the screen. His face hardened. "They know the internal conflict." "What does that mean?" Taehyung asked. Jin looked up. "They specifically mentioned that BTS may be divided over international activities." J-Hope put down his spoon. "How would an outside promoter know that?" Nobody answered. Suga walked toward the table because someone told them. The manager immediately said, "We don't know that." "Then explain the timing." "I can't." "Exactly." RM took the phone back. "There's another line." He read it again. They say Yoongi could establish a separate international identity if the group chooses not to expand. Yoongi's face went pale. What does that even mean? Jin looked at him. It means someone is testing you. Testing me for what? To see whether you'll say yes. Yoongi shook his head. I wouldn't. I know, Jimin said immediately. But they don't. Yoongi looked at him. Jimin's expression was calm, but his hands were clenched. They're trying to create a choice where there shouldn't be one. RM nodded. That's what this is. Suga looked toward the manager. And now we know what the strategy division meant by using the members who are willing. The room seemed to lose oxygen. Wait, J-Hope said. You think this is connected? I think it's too convenient to be a coincidence. Jin's eyes narrowed. Then we have a bigger problem. We already knew that, Suga said. No, Jin replied. We knew someone was trying to influence our future. We didn't know they were already approaching individual members. Yoongi sat down. His hands were trembling slightly. Jimin noticed and placed a hand over them. Don't blame yourself. I'm not. You are. Yoongi looked away. I keep thinking maybe I caused this. How? Because I'm the youngest, because they think I'm easier to convince. Jin's expression softened. Being the youngest doesn't make you responsible for what adults decide to do around you. Yoongi looked at him. But what if they keep doing it? Jin's answer came immediately. Then we keep saying no. RM looked at Yoongi. Unless you want to say yes. Everyone turned toward him. Yoongi stared at RM in disbelief. What? RM's voice remained calm. If you genuinely want the opportunity, you should be allowed to say yes. Jin's eyebrows rose. Namjoon. I'm serious. RM looked around the room. We're having this exact argument because we don't want anyone deciding what each of us is allowed to do. But this isn't just an individual opportunity, Jin said. It was designed to divide us. Maybe, Jin stepped closer. They literally wrote that Yoongi could build an identity separate from BTS. RM nodded. Which is why we need to know what Yoongi wants, not what we want him to want. Yoongi stared at the floor. I don't know. RM's expression softened. That's okay. No, it isn't. Yoongi rubbed his face. Everyone keeps asking what the future is, what BTS is going to become, whether we're staying in Korea or going overseas, whether we need a new base, whether we're going to do more solo work. And now somebody puts a huge contract in front of me and suddenly I'm supposed to know exactly what I want. His voice cracked. I don't. Jimin squeezed his hand. Then don't decide today. Yoongi looked at him. Can I say something? Always. Sometimes I feel like everyone expects me to be brave because I've been the youngest for so long. He laughed weakly. People see me on stage and think I can handle anything. His eyes became wet. But sometimes I just want someone to tell me it's okay not to know. Jin sat beside him. It's okay. Yoongi looked at him. Really? Really? Even if I don't know where I want to live? Yes. Even if I want to work overseas? Yes. Even if part of me wants to stay in Korea forever? Yes. Yoongi's eyes filled. Jin leaned closer. You don't owe anyone a perfect answer. Yoongi nodded, wiping his face quickly. But before anyone could respond, the manager's phone rang. He answered. His expression changed after only a few seconds. Understood. He ended the call. RM looked at him. What? The press has the contract. What contract? Yoongi asked. The manager looked at him. Yours. Yoongi's face went white. What? Someone leaked the offer. Jimin stood abruptly. No. Suga's voice became dangerously calm. How? I don't know. Who had access? The email was sent directly to Yoongi. Suga stared at him. Then how did the press get it? Nobody answered. RM took Yoongi's phone and examined the email header. This wasn't forwarded. Then, someone accessed his account. Yoongi immediately grabbed the phone. What? RM stopped him. Don't touch anything. But we need to preserve it. And turned to the manager. Get security. Already called. And legal. On the way. The atmosphere became electric. J-Hope stood near the window. What's the story saying? Taehyung checked his phone. They're saying Yoongi was secretly negotiating a solo international contract. Yoongi's mouth opened. I wasn't. We know, Jimin said. The article says he may be the first member to leave the group. Yoongi stared at the floor. Jin's jaw clenched. They're trying to turn him into the example. RM nodded. Exactly. Suga walked to the center of the room. We need to stop reacting. Jin looked at him. How? By figuring out who benefits. Again with that. Because it's the right question. Suga looked around. First, the group expansion proposal leaks. then a fake claim about a permanent headquarters. Then an internal email suggests proceeding with willing members. Now Yoongi receives an individual offer, and within hours the offer becomes public. He pointed toward the phone. That's a sequence. RM's eyes narrowed. Not an accident. No. Then somebody is engineering pressure. Yes. Why? Suga looked toward the window. Because they want us to make a decision while we're scared. Jin's voice became cold. Then we don't. Exactly. The door opened. 2 security staff entered with a legal representative. The room immediately became more formal. The lawyer listened as the manager explained everything. Then he looked at Yoongi. Did you respond to the offer? No. Did you open the email? Yes. Did you click any links? No. Did you forward it? No. Did you discuss it with anyone outside this room? No. The lawyer nodded. Then your position is relatively strong. Yoongi frowned. Relatively, someone accessed private correspondence and appears to have distributed it. Can they do that? They shouldn't. Jin looked at him. That's not what I asked. The lawyer sighed. No, they cannot simply take private correspondence and publish it without consequences. Then find them. We're trying. Jin leaned back. Try faster. RM placed a hand on Jin's shoulder. Hyung. Jin looked at him. What? We're angry. I know. But let's not make decisions while we're angry. Jin stared at him. You said that last night, because it still applies. Jin nodded reluctantly. Fine, the lawyer continued. There is another issue. Everyone looked at him. The promoter has issued a statement. Already, yes. What did they say? The lawyer opened his laptop. They claim they contacted Yoongi through an authorized representative. Yoongi immediately shook his head. I don't have one. That's the problem. RM frowned. They are implying someone on his team was authorized to negotiate. Yoongi looked at the manager. Was anyone? The manager shook his head. Not that I know. Suga stared at the lawyer. Then they're lying. Possibly, Suga repeated. Why does everyone keep using that word? The lawyer looked at him. Because we need evidence. Suga stepped back. Fine, let's find evidence. The room became chaotic over the next several hours. Calls were made. Servers were checked. Access logs were requested. Lawyers spoke in low voices. Managers moved between rooms. Screens displayed articles in multiple languages. Outside, cameras gathered. Fans waited behind barricades. Inside, BTS remained together, but the pressure was beginning to fracture their patience. At one point, J-Hope walked into the hallway and found RM alone. You okay? RM didn't turn. No. J-Hope leaned against the wall beside him. Good. RM glanced at him. Good. If you said yes, I'd know you were lying. RM smiled weakly. I'm starting to hate the phrase future of BTS. Why? Because every time someone says it, somebody ends up crying. J-Hope laughed softly. Fair. Then he became serious. Do you blame yourself? RM didn't answer. Namjoon, maybe. For what? For bringing the proposal. J-Hope shook his head. You didn't create the problem. I opened the door, maybe, but someone else walked through it. RM looked at him. What if I hadn't pushed for international expansion? Then we'd eventually have another argument. How do you know? Because we're 7 people. J-Hope smiled. We argue about dinner. RM laughed. That's true. We're not supposed to agree about everything. But this is bigger. Yes. J-Hope looked at him. That's why you can't decide alone. RM nodded. I know. And you can't let Jin decide alone either. RM smiled. I'd like to see you tell him that. I'm not suicidal. They both laughed quietly. Then J-Hope's expression changed. But there's something I've been wondering. What? What if the person behind this isn't trying to make us leave Korea? RM looked at him. What do you mean? What if they're trying to make us believe we have to choose? RM stared at him. Between Korea and overseas. Exactly. Why? Because as long as we're arguing about geography, we're not asking who benefits from the argument. RM's eyes narrowed. Suga said something similar. Maybe he's rubbing off on me. That's dangerous. J-Hope smiled. Very. They returned to the room. Jin was standing beside Yoongi, who looked exhausted. Jimin sat on the floor beside Taehyung. Suga was reviewing access logs with the legal team. RM walked over. Anything? Suga shook his head. Not yet. What about the email? There was an unusual login. Yoongi looked up. Where? Not where you'd expect. Suga turned the screen. A server registered to a consulting firm. And frowned. Which one? The lawyer read the name. RM immediately recognized it. That's the company advising on the international strategy. Everyone froze. You're kidding, J-Hope said. No, RM stared at the screen. So the people advising us had access to the information, apparently, and someone from their system accessed Jungkook's email. Suga nodded. Looks like it. Jin's face became hard. Then we have our answer. The lawyer raised a hand. Not yet. Jin looked at him. Why not? Because access doesn't prove intent. Suga smiled coldly. You're becoming very fond of that phrase, the lawyer sighed. We need to know whether the access was authorized. Find out. The lawyer nodded. We will. Suddenly Jungkook's phone buzzed again. Everyone looked at it. He hesitated. What? Jimin asked. Jungkook opened the message. His expression changed. It's from the promoter. What do they want? They want me to meet them. Jin immediately said no. Jungkook looked at him. They say they can explain everything. RM shook his head. Not alone. I know, Jungkook read further. They say they can prove someone from our management approached them first. The room went silent. Jin slowly turned toward the manager. What? The manager looked stunned. I never contacted them. Maybe someone else did. Suga stood. Show me. Jungkook handed him the phone. Suga read the message. They claim a representative from BTS's side asked them to prepare an individual offer. Jimin looked confused. Why would anyone do that? To test the market, Suga said. Jin's eyes hardened. Or to create leverage. RM took the phone. They want Jungkook to meet privately. No, Jin repeated. Not happening. Jungkook looked at him. What if they have information we need? Jin turned toward him. Then they can give it to the lawyers. What if they won't? Then we don't meet. Hyung. No, Jungkook's voice rose. You can't keep protecting me by making decisions for me. Jin froze. Jungkook immediately regretted the words, but they had already been spoken. I'm sorry. Jin looked away. No. Jungkook's eyes filled. I didn't mean you meant it. Jin took a breath. And you're right. He looked back at Jungkook. I can't decide for you. RM watched silently. Jin continued. But I'm asking you not to go alone. Jungkook nodded. I won't. We'll go together, RM said. All of us, Taehyung asked. Maybe not all, Suga replied. Too obvious. Jin looked at him. You have a plan. Not yet. That's comforting. Suga ignored him. We need to know what they want. The meeting was scheduled for the following evening at a private hotel suite. The decision immediately became controversial. The company wanted to cancel. The legal team wanted to control it. Jungkook wanted to attend. Jin wanted to protect him. RM wanted transparency. Suga wanted evidence. Jimin wanted everyone to remain calm. J-Hope wanted to make sure nobody forgot that they were people and not chess pieces. Taehyung, unusually quiet, simply said, I think someone expects us to fight. That sentence stayed with them. The next day passed under relentless pressure. Headlines multiplied. Some accused Jungkook of secretly planning to leave. Others accused RM of trying to turn BTS into an American act. Jin was called resistant to change. Suga was accused of controlling the group. Jimin and J-Hope were dragged into speculation despite saying nothing publicly. Taehyung became the subject of rumors about whether he supported Korea or overseas expansion. The 7 members watched the internet consume fragments of their lives and turn them into opposing camps. By evening, Jin couldn't take it anymore. He threw his phone onto the sofa. I hate this. RM looked up. What? People are fighting over which one of us is right. They're scared. I know, Jin paced. But some of them are saying I'm holding everyone back. RM remained silent. Say something. What do you want me to say? Tell me I'm not. RM stared at him. You're not. Jin stopped. You mean that? Yes. Even though you think we should expand. Yes. Jin nodded. Good, he sat, because I don't want to become the villain just because I don't want to move. RM leaned forward. You're not the villain. And you're not the villain. I know. Do you? RM smiled faintly. I'm trying to. Jin looked down. That's all any of us can do. At 7 that evening, the 7 members gathered in a private room before the meeting. No staff except essential legal representatives were present. Jin looked around. We need rules. Suga raised an eyebrow. Rules? Yes, go on. Nobody speaks for another member. Everyone nodded. Nobody signs anything. Nod. Nobody agrees to anything. Nod. If anyone feels uncomfortable, we leave. Nod. Jin looked at Jungkook. Especially you. Jungkook smiled faintly. Okay. RM added, and nobody makes a decision tonight. Jin nodded. Good. The hotel corridor was nearly empty when they arrived. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive perfume. Security escorted them upstairs. The suite door opened. 3 people were waiting. One was the promoter, another was a lawyer. The third was a man RM had seen before. His stomach dropped. "You," the man smiled. "Namjoon." Jin looked at RM. "You know him." RM's face was cold. "He's one of the consultants advising on our international strategy." The man smiled. "Formerly," Suga stepped forward. "Formerly, I resigned this morning." Jin laughed bitterly. "Convenient." The man ignored him. He looked directly at Yoongi. "We need to talk." Yoongi didn't move. "About what?" "Your future." Jin stepped between them. "No." Yoongi touched Jin's arm. "Hyung." Jin stopped. Yoongi looked at the man. "Say what you came to say." The man nodded. "The proposal sent to you wasn't designed to separate you from BTS." Suga scoffed. "Then why mention separation?" "Because your market value is extraordinary." Yoongi's face tightened. "I'm not a market. Everyone in this room knows you are." Jin's expression darkened. "Choose your next words carefully." The man continued. "The international market wants access to BTS, but it also wants flexibility. Individual activities make that possible." RM said, "So you were testing which member would accept first?" "No." "Then explain the email." The man looked at him. "I didn't send it." "But you knew about it." Silence. "Didn't you?" RM asked. The man smiled faintly. "I knew discussions were taking place. Without our approval, before formal approval." Jin stepped forward. "That's the same thing. Not legally." "I don't care about legally." The man looked at him. "That's your problem." Jin's eyes flashed. "What did you just say?" RM stepped between them. "Enough." The man looked at RM. "You want BTS to become an international institution. You know what that requires." RM's jaw tightened. "I want BTS to have choices. Choices cost money, and apparently trust. Trust doesn't build global infrastructure." Jin laughed. "Neither does betrayal." The room fell silent. The promoter shifted uncomfortably. The man looked at Yoongi again. "You have an opportunity to build something that belongs to you." Yoongi stared at him. "What does that mean?" "Your own team, your own creative division, your own international schedule. You wouldn't have to wait for 6 other people to agree." The words hung in the air. Yoongi looked at RM, then Jin, then the others. "And what happens to BTS?" The man shrugged. "BTS continues. Without me, potentially." Yoongi's face hardened. "Then no." The man blinked. "You haven't even heard the financial terms." "I don't need to." "You're making an emotional decision." Yoongi stepped closer. "Yes." His voice was steady. "I am." Jin stared at him. Yoongi continued. "Because BTS is emotional to me." The man said nothing. "You think that's weakness?" Yoongi shook his head. "It's the reason I'm here." Jimin's eyes filled with tears. Yoongi looked toward the man. "I don't want a future where I have everything except the people who helped me become who I am." The man sighed. "You're young." "Maybe." Yoongi smiled faintly. "But I'm old enough to know what I don't want." The man turned toward RM. "And you?" RM didn't answer immediately. He looked at Yoongi, then at Jin, then at the other members. "I want a future where every member can say no without being punished for it." The man smiled. "That's not how the industry works." RM's eyes hardened. "Then maybe the industry needs to change." The meeting ended without a contract, but nobody left feeling victorious. Outside the suite, Yoongi leaned against the wall. Jin stood beside him. "You okay?" "Yeah." "You sure?" "No." Jin smiled. "Good." Yoongi laughed softly. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Because pretending you're okay is worse." Yoongi looked at him. "I was scared." "I know. When he said I could have my own team." Jin waited. "Part of me wanted to hear more." Jin nodded. "That's honest." "Then I imagined waking up and not hearing you guys in the next room." His voice cracked. "And I couldn't do it." Jin put an arm around him. "You don't have to choose between ambition and love." Yoongi looked at him. "What if someday I do?" Jin looked toward the city lights. "Then we'll sit down and have this argument again." Yoongi smiled through his tears. "Even if it's painful, especially then." Across the corridor, RM stood with Suga. "You recognized him immediately," Suga said. "Yes." Because I saw his name in an earlier proposal." Suga looked at him. "What proposal?" RM hesitated. "A version I never showed the others." Suga's eyes narrowed. "Namjoon, I know." "What was in it?" RM looked down. "A restructuring plan for BTS, for the entire operation." And RM's voice dropped. "It included individual international divisions." Suga stared at him. How long ago? 3 months. You knew. I knew there was a proposal, and you didn't tell us. RM closed his eyes. I was trying to understand it. Suga shook his head. You're doing it again. I know. No, you don't. Suga's voice remained quiet, which made it more dangerous. You keep thinking secrecy protects us from conflict. It doesn't. It only delays the explosion. RM nodded. You're right. Then stop. RM looked at him. I will. Good. Suga started walking away, then he stopped. And Namjoon, yeah, don't assume everyone will agree with you. RM smiled faintly. I don't. Good. Suga continued down the hall. RM remained behind. A few minutes later, the 7 members met in the hotel lobby. No cameras were visible, but they could feel the outside world waiting. Jin looked at the others. Food. J-Hope immediately smiled. Finally, they left together. Outside, the night air was cool. Seoul's lights shimmered around them. Nobody knew exactly what tomorrow would bring. But as they walked, Jungkook looked at the 6 people beside him and realized something. The future had not become clearer. It had become more complicated. Yet somehow he felt less afraid, because the question was no longer whether BTS belonged in Korea or somewhere else. The real question was whether they could build a future big enough to hold all 7 of them without forcing any one person to disappear inside it. That question would not be answered tonight. Perhaps it shouldn't be. They had spent too many years believing that every difficult question needed an immediate answer. Now they were learning that sometimes the bravest thing a group could do was remain together long enough to find the right one. The 7 walked beneath the city lights, their footsteps uneven but moving in the same direction. Behind them, the hotel disappeared into the darkness. Ahead, Seoul continued glowing, familiar and restless, while somewhere beyond the horizon another world waited. For once, none of them needed to decide which world belonged to them. They knew something more important. Wherever they went next, they would not let anyone choose for them. Tell me you didn't sign it. Jin's voice cut through the room before the door had even finished closing. RM stopped with one hand still on the handle. The 7 members had barely returned from the hotel, but the atmosphere waiting for them inside the private studio was nothing like the quiet they had left behind. 3 executives sat around the long table, 2 lawyers stood near the window, and a screen behind them displayed a single sentence in enormous black letters: International expansion decision required. RM stared at it for several seconds. What is this? A meeting, one executive replied. Jin laughed without humor. No, a meeting is when people are invited to discuss something. This looks like a trial. The executive's expression tightened. We need clarity. Then start by answering my question. Jin pointed at RM. Did he sign anything? No, RM said. Then why are we here? Because the situation has escalated. Suga slowly removed his coat. You mean because your plan to pressure us stopped working? The executive looked at him. That is an unfair characterization. Is it? Suga sat down. Then correct it. Nobody answered. J-Hope remained standing beside the door, watching the executives carefully. Jimin sat beside Jungkook, who looked exhausted after the previous night's confrontation. Taehyung leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Jin remained standing. I'm waiting. Finally, the executive said, there is concern among international partners that BTS may not be aligned internally. Jin's eyes narrowed. And whose fault is that? The public disagreement has created uncertainty. We argued in a private room, and within hours the contents were everywhere. Which means someone leaked it. We're investigating. You're always investigating. Jin's voice became sharper, but somehow every time you investigate, another private document appears online. RM looked at him. Hyung. No, Jin turned toward him. I'm done being polite. He faced the executives. You approached us with a plan that included individual divisions. You let an old draft leak. Someone accessed Jungkook's private email. Then an offer appeared that conveniently suggested he could build a career without the rest of us. Now you call us into a room and tell us investors are nervous. The executive's face hardened. You're simplifying a very complicated situation. No, Jin replied. I'm making it simple enough that you can't hide behind it. The room went silent. The senior lawyer finally spoke. There is another development. Everyone turned. What? The consulting firm has admitted that one of its employees accessed internal files without authorization. RM's face changed. Who? We don't have a name yet. Suga leaned forward. You don't have a name. The employee used a compromised credential. Whose credential? A senior consultant. Jin laughed. Convenient. What? The person responsible just happens to be invisible. We're tracing the activity. Again. Jin shook his head. Everything is always being traced, investigated, reviewed, and analyzed. Meanwhile, we're the ones standing here while strangers sell stories about us. The executive slammed a folder onto the table. Because you're refusing to understand the commercial reality, everyone froze. You think the world waits for 7 people to feel comfortable, the executive continued. It doesn't. Opportunities disappear, markets shift, partners move on. Your global relevance requires infrastructure. RM's eyes hardened. We understand. Then act like it. We are acting. No, you're hesitating, because we haven't agreed. That's the problem. Jin stepped closer. No, that's the point. The executive stared at him. You can't operate a global enterprise by committee forever. BTS isn't your enterprise. The sentence came from RM. The executive looked at him. Excuse me. RM's voice was calm. You said global enterprise. BTS is a group. The business around us can be complicated. Our music can be global, our teams can expand, but the 7 of us are not a corporate structure you can reorganize whenever the market demands it. The executive leaned back. Then what are you? RM looked at the 6 people behind him. A band. Suga smiled faintly. And family. Jin added, unfortunately. Taehyung laughed quietly. Even Jimin smiled. The executive didn't. That sentiment won't protect you. Maybe not, RM said. But money doesn't either. The room fell silent again. Then Yoongi spoke. Can I ask something? Everyone looked at him. He stood slowly. If the international plan is so important, why did you approach me separately? The executive didn't answer. Yoongi's voice became firmer. Why me? Your individual popularity makes you a natural candidate for international projects. That's not an answer. It's the truth. No, Yoongi shook his head. It's part of the truth. The executive's eyes narrowed. Yoongi continued. You knew we were arguing, you knew the proposal had leaked, you knew people were questioning whether we could agree. Then someone offers me a contract that specifically says I could work independently if the group doesn't expand. He paused. That's not an accident. We didn't authorize that offer, but someone did. We cannot control every outside party. Yoongi looked at him. You can control whether you encourage them. Nobody spoke. Yoongi's hands trembled slightly, but he didn't step back. I'm tired of people talking about my future like I'm not sitting in the room. Jin's expression softened. Good, he whispered. Yoongi looked at the executives. If you want to know what I want, ask me. The executive stared at him. What do you want? Yoongi inhaled. I want to perform, I want to make music, I want to work with people I admire, I want to travel, I want to try things that scare me. He paused. And I want to come home. The room became quiet. That's it? The executive asked. Yoongi smiled sadly. You make it sound small. The world isn't small, neither is home. Jin looked down for a moment. RM watched Yoongi with something like pride. Jimin reached for his hand. Yoongi squeezed it. The executive sighed. Nobody is trying to remove you from BTS. Suga immediately replied, but you are preparing for the possibility. The executive didn't answer. That's what I thought. Suga leaned back. Now we're getting somewhere. J-Hope finally spoke. What happens if we say no? To what? To the international headquarters. Then we continue under the existing structure. And if we say yes, then we accelerate global operations. And if we say we want something in between, the executive hesitated, then we'd need to renegotiate. J-Hope nodded. So there is another option. There is always another option. Then why were we told there was a deadline? The executive looked irritated. Because partners need certainty. That's not the same thing. J-Hope's voice remained gentle, but there was steel underneath it. You're asking us to make a permanent decision while we're still trying to understand what happened. RM nodded. Exactly. The lawyer stepped forward. There is one more issue. Jin sighed. Of course. The leak may not have originated from the consulting firm. Everyone looked at him. What? The investigation found evidence of a second access point. Suga stood. Where? A private device connected to a hotel network. RM's eyes narrowed. Which hotel? The lawyer gave the name. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Jin looked at RM. RM looked at Suga. Suga's expression changed. That's the hotel where we met the promoter. Yes, Jimin whispered, someone was there. We knew that, Taehyung said, but now we know someone accessed the information from there. Jin's face tightened. Who had access to the room? Security records are being reviewed. Show us. The lawyer hesitated. There are privacy concerns. Jin's laugh was bitter. Our private documents are all over the internet and you're worried about privacy. We have to follow procedure. Then follow it faster. The executive stood. Enough. Jin turned toward him. No, this meeting is becoming unproductive. Then make it productive. We cannot investigate in this atmosphere. RM stepped forward. Then don't investigate us. Investigate the leak. The executive stared at him. We're doing that. Good, RM nodded. Because until we know who is manipulating this situation, BTS is not signing anything. You can't hold the entire organization hostage. We're not. RM's voice remained steady. We're refusing to make a decision while someone is actively trying to influence it. The executive's expression darkened. You may regret this. Jin immediately stepped beside RM. Maybe. J-Hope joined them, then Jimin, Taehyung, Suga, finally Yoongi. 7 people standing in a line. The executive looked at them and seemed to understand that the room had changed. Meeting over, RM said. We're not done, the executive replied. We are. RM turned toward the door. The members followed. As they stepped into the hallway, Jin whispered, that was satisfying. Suga answered, don't get comfortable. Why? Because I think we're about to find out how ugly this really is. They walked in silence until they reached a private elevator. The doors closed. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Taehyung said, I think they were scared. Jin looked at him. Who? The executives. Why? Because we said no. Suga nodded. Exactly. Jimin looked at RM. Do you think they expected us to agree? I think they expected us to argue long enough that we'd eventually accept whatever solution was placed in front of us. Yoongi frowned. But why? RM looked at the elevator floor. Because uncertainty makes people easier to control. Jin's expression darkened. Then we need certainty. About what? J-Hope asked. Jin looked at all of them. About us. The elevator opened. They entered the studio. The door shut behind them. Nobody spoke until RM finally said, we need to have our own meeting. Without management? Jimin asked. Yes, Suga nodded. Agreed. They moved into the rehearsal room. The lights were dim. The mirrored wall reflected 7 tired faces. Jin sat on the floor. Let's start with the question everyone is avoiding. Which is? Taehyung asked. Do we actually want to expand internationally? Nobody answered immediately. RM looked down. I do. Jin nodded. I do too. Suga said, I don't want an international headquarters. J-Hope looked at him. But you want international work. Yes. What's the difference? Control. Everyone looked at him. Suga continued. An international headquarters creates a permanent center of gravity. People start moving toward it. Decisions start happening there. Eventually, Korea becomes the place we visit instead of the place we return to. Jin nodded. Exactly, RM frowned. But what if the headquarters is just administrative? Then why call it headquarters? Because someone likes expensive words. Taehyung laughed. That's true. Jimin sat cross-legged. What if we create temporary studios instead? RM looked at him. Explain. We don't need to relocate. We can rent or build creative spaces wherever we're working. Los Angeles for one project, London for another, Tokyo, Paris, wherever. J-Hope nodded. No permanent move, Yoongi said, and everyone can choose whether they want to participate in each project. Jin looked at RM. Would that satisfy you? RM thought. Maybe. I want something sustainable. Then build it around us, Jin said. Not the other way around. RM nodded. Fair. Suga leaned back. There's another issue. What? Solo work. The room went quiet. We keep treating solo projects like they're a threat to BTS. Jimin looked at him. Are they? They can be. How? If management uses them to separate us. Yoongi frowned. But we all have our own interests. Exactly. Suga looked at him. That's why the rules need to change. RM understood immediately. You're saying individual careers shouldn't require group permission. I'm saying we need a system where personal freedom and group identity don't compete. Jin nodded slowly. That's what we should have been discussing from the beginning. J-Hope smiled. Maybe that's the real future conversation. Taehyung looked at the mirror. Not Korea versus overseas. Then what? Jimin asked. Taehyung turned around. Together versus controlled. Nobody spoke. RM looked at him for a long moment. That's it. The phrase settled over the room. Together versus controlled. Not home versus world. Not group versus individual. Not Korea versus America. It was about who had the right to define their lives. Suddenly Jungkook's phone vibrated. He looked down. His expression changed. What? Jin asked. Jungkook didn't answer. Jungkook. He slowly turned the phone around. A photograph filled the screen. It showed the 7 members leaving the hotel the previous night. But the image had been edited. The photograph appeared to show Jungkook walking away from the others. The caption read, JUNGKOOK chooses solo future after private meeting. Jimin's face went pale. That's fake. Obviously, Jin said, but look at the second image. Jungkook swiped. Another photograph. This one showed RM and Jin arguing outside the hotel. The angle made it look like Jin was pointing aggressively at RM. The caption claimed Jin had confronted RM over Jungkook's decision. Jin stared at the screen. That didn't happen. We know, RM said. But the public doesn't. Suga took the phone. This is coordinated. How can you tell? J-Hope asked. The images were released within minutes of each other. Maybe someone photographed us. No, Suga zoomed in. Look at the timestamps. Everyone leaned closer. The photos were processed before we even left the hotel. RM's eyes narrowed, meaning someone had the images ready. Jin looked at him. They knew what story they wanted before the meeting ended. Exactly. Jimin's voice became quiet. Then they weren't reporting what happened. They were creating what happened. The room went silent. A sudden knock came at the door. Everyone turned. The door opened slowly. Their manager stepped inside. His face was pale. We found something. Suga immediately stood. What? The person who accessed the hotel network. Who? The manager swallowed. A member of the consulting team. RM's face hardened. The same company. Yes. Name. The manager looked at them. It's not who you think. Jin frowned. Then who? The manager looked at RM. It's someone who has been working with you for years. Nobody moved. Who? RM demanded. The manager's eyes lowered. Your former international coordinator. RM froze. He's not with us anymore. He resigned 6 months ago. Then why does he still have access? That's what we're trying to understand. Suga's face became cold. Where is he now? We don't know. Jin stepped forward. Find him. We are. No, Jin shook his head. Find him before somebody else does. RM looked at him. What do you mean? Jin's expression had changed. If he's behind this, he's not the only person involved. Suga nodded. Exactly. Jimin looked frightened. How many people? We don't know, RM said. Jungkook's voice was quiet. What if he's been planning this for months? Nobody answered. Taehyung stared at the photograph on the phone. Then the leak wasn't the beginning. RM looked at him. What? It was the moment we noticed. The room went silent. J-Hope whispered, how long has someone been manipulating our schedules? Suga looked toward the door. That's what we need to find out. Suddenly the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the room went dark. Jungkook instinctively reached for Jimin. Jin stood. Nobody moved. The emergency lights came on a second later, bathing the room in dim red. A phone began ringing. Not one of theirs. Everyone froze. The sound came from a drawer near the wall. Suga walked toward it slowly. Don't, RM warned. I need to know. He opened the drawer. Inside was a phone, black, no case, no identification. It kept ringing. Suga looked at RM. That's not ours. Jin whispered, don't answer. The phone stopped. Then a message appeared on the screen. Suga read it aloud. You are looking in the wrong direction. Everyone stared. Another message arrived. The person you are searching for is not the one who started this. Jimin's face went pale. Who is this? A third message appeared. Ask yourselves who benefits when BTS becomes afraid of itself. The phone went black. Nobody spoke. Then RM slowly looked around the room. 7 members, 1 manager, 2 security staff outside. No strangers. No obvious threat. Yet the message had appeared inside their private studio. Jin's voice was barely audible. Someone is watching us. Suga looked at the dark phone. Yes. Then what do we do? J-Hope asked. Suga looked at RM. RM looked at Jin. Jin looked at the others. For once, nobody had an immediate answer. The fear was different now. It wasn't fear of contracts or headlines or international expansion. It was the realization that someone understood their arguments well enough to manipulate them. Someone knew what frightened them. Someone knew which member to approach. Someone knew how to turn one conversation into 1,000 rumors. And someone had just demonstrated that they could reach the room where BTS felt safest. RM finally spoke. "We stop fighting each other," Jin nodded. "We start asking questions." Jimin took a breath. "Together. Together," Jungkook repeated. Taehyung stepped closer. "Whatever happens next, nobody meets anyone alone." Suga nodded. "Agreed." J-Hope looked at RM. "And no more secrets." RM's eyes lowered. "No more secrets." Jin stared at him. "Promise." RM looked directly at him. "Promise." The tension didn't disappear. If anything, it deepened. But something had changed. They were no longer 7 people standing around a problem. They were 7 people facing an unknown force together. Outside the studio, cameras continued flashing. Headlines continued multiplying. The world continued arguing about whether BTS belonged in Korea, America, or somewhere between the two. But inside that room, the question had changed. They were no longer asking where they would go. They were asking who had been trying to decide for them. And for the first time since the controversy began, every member understood that the greatest danger wasn't the possibility of BTS changing. It was allowing fear to make them change in ways they never chose. Jin walked to the center of the room and held out his hand. "Come on." Jungkook placed his hand over Jin's. Jimin followed. Taehyung, J-Hope, Suga, finally RM. 7 hands, 7 people, 1 promise. No matter how far the future pulled them, nobody would be left behind in the argument. They stood that way for several seconds, the emergency lights painting their faces red, until Jin quietly laughed. "You know what?" Everyone looked at him. "This is probably the worst team-building exercise we've ever done." J-Hope burst out laughing. Jimin covered his mouth. Jungkook shook his head. Even Suga smiled. RM laughed hardest of all. The fear remained. The unanswered questions remained. The stranger's phone remained on the table. The leaked documents remained online. The future remained uncertain. But beneath all of it was something stronger than certainty. Trust. Not perfect trust. Not effortless trust. The kind that had been bruised, challenged, and rebuilt in the same room. As the night deepened outside the windows, the 7 finally sat together on the floor. Nobody talked about contracts anymore. Nobody mentioned headlines. Nobody said Korea or America. They talked about food, about music, about old rehearsals, about ridiculous memories, about the first time Jungkook had fallen asleep in the practice room and denied it, about Jin's terrible jokes, about J-Hope's endless energy, about Taehyung's strange ideas, about Jimin's habit of apologizing when someone else bumped into him, about Suga pretending not to care while remembering every detail, about RM carrying books everywhere even when nobody asked him to. They laughed until the room felt like theirs again. And when dawn eventually approached, Jin looked around at the 6 faces beside him and realized that perhaps the future of BTS had never been about choosing between staying and leaving. Perhaps it had always been about remembering why they had chosen one another in the first place. The city outside began to brighten. Seoul remained home. The world remained open. And somewhere in the darkness beyond them, someone was still watching. But this time, BTS was watching back.